who are your favourite British music artists. We're going to tell you ours and explain the difference between upside down, inside out, and back to front in this episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hello and welcome. I'm Craig.
And I'm Reza.
And if you are a new listener to the show, you are very welcome. And if you've come back to listen again, thank you very much. With over 45 years of teaching between Reza and I, we're going to help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Reza?
I'm doing very well, Craig. How are you?
I'm really excited. It's great to be back podcasting again after a little summer break. It's good to see you, mate. And I'm looking forward to sharing some English knowledge with our listeners.
Same here. You say after a summer break. Some of the listeners might be thinking, what break? What break are you talking about? Can you explain to them?
Well, we do record these podcasts in advance. So we recorded podcasts so that you can listen over the summer, during the summer. And then we had a short break, and now we're back again with a lot of enthusiasm and motivation to record more podcasts for you.
Sorry for those of you who thought, every Sunday Craig and Reza get together and do the podcast. No. We record a few in advance, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 in one day, and we release them periodically.
And that's the reason if you send us feedback, if you send an email or record a voice message, you might not hear it the following week or in 2 weeks. So please be patient. Please wait. We promise that we will get to your feedback eventually. And speaking of feedback, we have a voice message from Edgar from Santiago de Chile.
Hello Reza and hello Craig. My name is Edgar and I am from Santiago de Chile. First of all, thank you for all work that you do every week. I come across with your podcast 2 weeks ago, and I think it's a very, very useful resource to improve my English. I am 26 years old and I'm an industrial engineer. Unfortunately, I was laid off the last month and I'm looking for, a new job. I think I'll be facing some interviews in English. So I'd like to ask you if it were possible that you make a podcast about interview vocabulary. Maybe give us some pieces of advice, do and don'ts. I think this will be very helpful to me and all people that follow your podcast and also is unemployed. Thank you, and all my best to you guys. Bye.
Thank you very much, Edgar, for your voice message. And sorry to hear that you were laid off from your job. Laid off means that, unfortunately, Edgar lost his job. Another way to say that is to be made redundant. So it wasn't his fault. The company had to make him redundant, or they had to lay him off from his job. Any comments, Reza?
Yes, Edgar, that was a very nice use of a phrasal verb. However, you did get another phrasal verb wrong. So you got one right, it was very impressive. But you said that you said, I come across with your podcast. No, I come across your podcast. No, with. I came across your podcast, not I came across plus with. Take with away and then it's good.
Yeah, and to come across means to find by chance, to find accidentally. For example, you could be looking in your house, in your drawer, in your cupboard, and you come across an old photograph, for example. So it's a great phrasal verb. Just remember it's not with. It's come across.
Another thing, which is a very common mistake with most foreign speakers, it doesn't matter what your native language is, the word the is a tricky word in English. And you said, Edgar, that you were laid off the last month. That's wrong, but we understand you. You should say, I was laid off last month without the. If you want to say el mes pasado, it's last month. No the. And it's the same for el año pasado, el día pasado, el siglo pasado. No the. You say last month, last year, last century. No the. Because if you say the, it's something different. The last month is el último mes. You could say, for example, the last month of the year is December. I'm not talking about el mes pasado. I'm just saying el último mes. So no the when you want to say el mes pasado, last month.
Yeah, that's a good point. Edgar, very good pronunciation. Loved your pronunciation. And I like the expression, I'll be facing some interviews in English. To face something means to have or to be in contact with interviews. You're going to need interview English because you'll be facing or having some interviews in English. That was very good.
And to Edgar and all our fans in Chile, we have a few. I was thinking about you guys in Chile this very morning. I was thinking about you and I was thinking about Craig. Let me explain. I was having some toast with a bit of tomato and olive oil on it, as I do, and I sprinkled a little bit of my sal con merquén, which Craig very kindly brought from Chile as a present for me.
You've still got some left. That was a few years ago.
It's incredible. It's one of the best presents I've ever had in my life. I use it every day, Craig. I think a Chilean salt is miraculous. First of all, it lasts forever. you no matter how much you use, it never seems to run out. I'm about halfway through the bottle. Imagine that. Oh. It lasts forever because when you grind is moler, it only seems to use up a very small amount. But it's so tasty, it's fantastic. For those of you who don't know what is sal con merquén, it's salt with merquén, which is some kind of smoked pepper, something like a red pepper with a little bit of coriander, cilantro, and a little bit of something else. I can't quite remember right now. Thrown in with the salt, and it's delicious.
Yeah, it's very good.
I highly recommend Chilean sal con merquén. Do try it.
So to go back to Edgar's question, the job interviews that he will probably be facing soon. Yes, Edgar, if you go back to episode 58 of our podcast, so go to inglespodcast.com/58, we spoke about job interviews, and specifically we spoke about job interview questions in that episode. And also in episode 43, so inglespodcast.com/43, we spoke about how to have a job interview in English and some work vocabulary. So go to those two episodes, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of what you're looking for. Also, to remind any patrons of our show, and we'll thank you at the end of this podcast, but if you are a patron of the show, go over to the Patreon website and you can download an ebook and an audio lesson on how to pass a job interview in English. We also sell that on our website at store.mansioningles.net. But if you're supporting the show with Patreon, you can get that for free.
And I'd just like to point something out about Patreon. We had a comment recently, I think it was from Manuel, who's a Patreon sponsor, and he wanted to know what was the point in being a Patreon sponsor if the show notes that have been transcribed very kindly by some listeners are available to everybody. Well, Manuel, one of the things that you get only if you're a Patreon sponsor is how to pass a job interview in English. So that's only available for Patreon sponsors. So there are a few things that we've made exclusive to you guys who kindly sponsor us.
And there is going to be more. I do have some news, but I'm not going to tell you this episode. But there are going to be some important changes and exciting news coming about Patreon. So, and I'll tell you about that in the next episode or the next 2 episodes. Before we continue with our audio feedback, I just want to say a very quick hello to Melina. Do you remember Melina Reza? from the castles episode.
I certainly do. Hi, Melina.
Hi, Melina. She asked us to speak about castles, and that was episode 173. Do you remember she lost her job?
That's right, yeah.
She lost her job, and unfortunately, she couldn't continue studying with paid classes.
Yeah.
She has a new job now that's even better than her last job.
Oh, congratulations.
So congratulations, Melina. We wanted to say hello, congratulations, and we love sharing fantastic news of this sort, so great.
And hopefully your knowledge of English had something to do with you getting that job.
Let's hope so. Anyway, let us know how the new job's going, and if you'd like to send an audio message, then we'd love to play it on the show. Reza, any more feedback?
Yes, we got some more audio feedback. It's on episode 165, which was the episode about chemistry. And the feedback's from Maria and Alex.
Great, let's listen to Maria and Alex.
Hi, Rasa. Hi, Craig. I'm Maria. I am a chemistry teacher, and I really like your program of chemistry. Thank you very much. I really appreciate because I think it's so useful for my job and for the near future. And answering your question, I think the answer is simple. When you are talking about water, you have to use the name molecules, because molecule is a mix of two or more atoms. Otherwise, when you are talking about the particles, for example, different kind of atoms, wherever, you can use particles. So the right word in your context, it could be particles, no molecules. Thank you very much, and that's it.
Hello there, and I'm Alex again. Thanks for your podcast. It was quite interesting. And I love the explanation about Michael Collins. I happened to see in the movie, and it was quite interesting as well, talking things about life. Thank you. Bye now.
Well, thank you very much, Maria and Alex. We're happy you enjoyed the episode, and thanks for your clarification, Maria, on particle and molecule. And we're pleased you enjoyed the episode. Any comments, Reza?
Thank you to both of you. And now we know a little bit more about the difference between particular and molecular chemistry. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And well done, Maria, for remembering the article A with chemist or chemistry teacher. So yeah, with all professions, you need the article. But the pronunciation normally is the weak schwa not necessarily a. So, for example, I would say, I'm a teacher. I probably wouldn't say I'm a teacher unless I wanted to stress it. So just remember that weak pronunciation of a teacher, a chemistry teacher, a chemist, etc. Next, we have some feedback from Maite from Chativa about the upside down King Felipe Cinco. Do you remember that, Reza? We spoke about the king being upside down in Chativa.
I certainly do, because I've known a lot of Socrats, that's people from Chativa, Chativenses, in my time, and I find the whole story very interesting, but I didn't know the details. So thank you to Maite. She has she's cleared up my doubts. Shall I read her email?
Yep, go ahead.
She writes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for everything you do. I really enjoy listening to your superb podcasts.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mighty. Secondly, just as you asked for, here is my little research about the upside down, we'll talk about that later, the upside down King Philip V. Apparently, it was a Francesc Gil's idea, canon of the Seu of Valencia, in the 50s, who suggested Museo del Almoradís manager hang the painting upside down, we'll talk about that later, upside down, as a symbolic meaning of punishment. Philip V, that's Felipe V, ordered his men to burn Chativa twice, and he also exchanged its name for San Felipe. Don't you think that this is more than enough probable cause? Kisses, matey.
Yeah, I think it
I
is.
do. If I were a Chativense, I'd be a bit annoyed, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. So Maite used the expression upside down because the picture of King Felipe was hung upside down, which in Spanish is boca abajo or al reverse. But that reminded me of the expressions inside out and back to front, because it's possible to confuse those expressions. So imagine you put your t-shirt on inside out. That would be a bit of a problem, wouldn't it?
Yes, that certainly would, because if there was a picture or something nice to see on your t-shirt, people wouldn't be able to see it because you have it on inside out. The picture would be touching your skin, but it shouldn't be touching your skin. It should be on the exterior. That's inside out.
Yeah, it wouldn't be facing outside, so it would be al reverse, as you'd say in Spanish. So that's inside out. Upside down is the picture, so you turn the picture upside down, which is boca abajo, and the other one back to front. Now, you can put a t-shirt on back to front.
What would happen to the picture then, Craig?
Well, I was going to ask you, if you put the t-shirt on back to front, the lovely picture that should be in the front would be on your back.
Your back, la espalda. Yeah.
So everybody following you, walking behind you, would see it, but nobody in front of you would see it. So that's back to front. Can you think of another example with back to front?
Yes, if you put your trousers, pantalones, your trousers or your jeans or something like that on back to front, the zip, cremallera, the zip will not be at the front, it will be at the back.
Where your culo.
Where your culo, your
Yeah.
bottom is. And that's, if you're a gentleman, you'll understand, like me, that's not much use. You need it at the front. So that would be the result of putting on trousers back to front.
So don't put your trousers on back to front.
By the way, forgive me for saying so, but English is superior to Spanish in this area because, as Craig said, inside out, al revés. Back to front, al revés. Doesn't help you very much because in English we distinguish between them, as we've just said. Inside out is not the same as back to front. But in Spanish, you've only got one word for both.
Yep.
We've got two expressions.
And I've just noticed that Reza's wearing a very nice t-shirt, and I've just noticed that it says Galgos 112.
Yeah, that is the picture on the front.
That's so if that was back to front, it would be on your back and not on your front. It would look very silly. Next, we have an email from our friend Alex Perdel. Do you remember Alex from the podcast Aventura Bilingüe?
I do. It's a great podcast.
Alex sent an email to ask us to mention something that's happening on the 20th, 21st and 22nd of October, which is next month as we're recording this podcast. And it's the 4th Congreso Internacional de la Enseñanza Bilingüe en Centros Educativos. It's in Madrid, and Alex is going to that conference. Now, he said it's not cheap. So if you're a teacher or if you are involved in teaching in the Spanish-speaking world and you are interested in this conference, then try to get your school to pay. So if you've got a private academy or a state school or whatever, then obviously better if they pay for you to go. However, if you would like to go and pay yourself, on Alex's webpage, he's offering a 20% discount. So I'll put a link to Alex's webpage, which is crecereningles.com, where you can get that discount, and you'll find the link on inglespodcast.com/175. Very sad to hear, Alex, that he will not be coming to the big podcasting conference in Alicante, which is on the 27th, 28th and 29th of October. It's the Jotopod annual Jornadas de Podcasting, and you can find more details at jotopod.es if you are a podcaster or if you would like to come and have a coffee with Reza and I and say hello. We're going to be there 27th, 28th and 29th of October. We'd love to meet you. Come up and say hello. And thanks for Alex for sending us that news. What's next, Reza?
We have a little bit more feedback. We've got a voice message from Paco from Badajoz.
Hello, Craig. Hello, Reza. This is Paco from Badajoz. How are you? I hope you are well. Now it's September. The academic course has begun in schools, colleges, and universities. For those of us that finished our studies a long time ago, it's the moment to renew our commitment to the English language with new energy and enthusiasm. Learning English is a kind of religion or addiction, and as an addict, I want to thank you, both of you, for this podcast, so entertaining, amusing, and amazing. I think you should monetize this effort via advertisement, and that way keeping it free of charge as it's now. If you don't mind, I would like to mention other podcasts that I consider interesting as well to the AIRC community. The podcasts are Teacher Luke, which direction is teacherluke.co.uk, and acupofenglish.com. As I said, thank you again. You both deserve the best. Bye.
Thanks, Paco. Always good to hear from you. And he's right, isn't he, Reza? It's time to renew our commitment to the English language with energy and enthusiasm. Very well said, Paco.
And you said we should monetize the podcast. That means make money out of it. Well, I suppose we do make a tiny bit of money out of it, Craig, don't we?
Yeah, we have got sponsors on the show, so that does help us a little bit. But don't worry, because we always intend to keep this podcast free, and we have got no intention of stopping in the near future. But thanks for your message, Paco. We appreciate it. And also thank you for your recommendations. We have mentioned our friend Luke before, Luke Thompson over at teacherluke.co.uk. Has a very, very good podcast. Just one thing, Paco, you said the direction of the podcast. In English, we would say the address of the podcast, or perhaps the URL of the podcast, which means Uniform Resource Locator, which nobody says. Everybody says URL. So you can just say the URL is teacherluke.co.uk. And the other one he recommended, I hadn't heard of. Had you heard of that one, Reza? A Cup of English?
No, I had a look. Thanks to you, Paco. I had a look and I liked it. Yeah, it's a nice website.
Me too. And I think it's Anna over there. She's been podcasting since 2008. There's loads of episodes, lots and lots of episodes for you to enjoy. It is a very, very nice podcast. So go over and have a listen. You can find that at the address acupofenglish.com. Next, we have an email from Francisco from Úbeda. I'll read it for you. Hi, friends, says Francisco. How are you doing? Just to say the episode about music was brilliant. Thank you very much. That was episode 163. So if you want to listen to that, that's inglespodcast.com/163. So Francisco continues, I empathize with Reza because I played the guitar in a heavy metal band when I was younger. I had to leave because of my degree, and it was a difficult decision, but the right one. Nowadays, I still play my Gibson at home, remembering the real buzz you feel when you pull the strings on stage.
Oh, that's nice to hear that, Francisco. It's nice to know that I'm not the only one who had to give up music as a serious profession. It's hard, isn't it?
Do you feel the buzz when you're on stage because you're still playing on stage?
I do play on stage from time to time. In fact, I was at a rehearsal yesterday and I was with a couple of guys playing guitar, and one of them was playing a Gibson, by the way, Francisco.
There you go.
Great guitar.
Francisco continues, by the way, have you ever made any episode about the British rock legends? Would you consider it? The Beatles, Pink Floyd, The Who, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and so on. I'm deeply in love with British music. In my opinion, it's the best item of your culture. maybe better to say the best thing about your culture. Sounds better than the best item. The best thing about your culture. Thanks a million for everything. Cheers from Ubeda. Well, thank you very much. So we liked your idea. We thought we'd discuss some musicians and groups and bands that we like from the British music scene. Before we look at this list of our favourite artists and musicians, let's look at some vocabulary that we'll be using as we speak about these people. So the first expression, groundbreaking. To break ground means abrir camino, ser pionero. So as an adjective, groundbreaking is somebody who is a pioneer in an area. So you can have a groundbreaking musician, groundbreaking artist, groundbreaking anything. Someone who breaks ground.
And groundbreaking artists are usually groundbreaking precisely because they innovate. They do something which has never been done before. Innovar. So they innovate, they use innovation.
And a lot of these artists have been very influential. They've had influence not only on the music scene, but also culturally in pop culture, sometimes in fashion as well, and image. So they've all been very influential. Influyente. Influential. The stress is on the first syllable. To have influence.
A useful expression to talk about famous pop and rock stars is to lead the way. For example, we could say that Chuck Berry led the way in electric guitar playing. He was the first person to really make it an important art form, in my opinion.
And also a lot of these musicians are cutting edge. Cut is cortar, but edge can be borde. So the edge of the table is the borde de la mesa. Or you could also say ventaja. For example, if you play basketball and you are very tall, you have an edge on your opponents. You have an advantage. So these people are cutting edge. They're really vanguards in the area of music.
Although vanguard's a good word, but it's a bit more formal, isn't it? Much more typical to say cutting edge with informal English. Mm-hmm. Another nice informal expression is trailblazing. A trail is a path, un camino, a trail. So blazing means full of fire. So a trailblazer, someone who does things which are trailblazing, they like open a new path of fire. So can you imagine a new way with fire? That's very exciting.
And music and fashion changes. It has different trends or tendencias. So if a person or a band is trend setting, that's one word, trend setting, then they set the trends or make the trends in music or fashion or art or whatever. So a trend-setting musician sets the trend.
A wannabe, that's W-A-N-N-A-B-E, a wannabe, is someone who wants to be, so wannabe, someone who wants to be famous. So they're not famous yet, but they really want to be a famous pop star, rock star, or famous anything, famous actor or businessman, whatever. But it's very common in the world of music, a wannabe.
Some words like to go together. They like to collocate. At the beginning of this podcast, we mentioned upside down, inside out, and back to front. Another similar collocation is up and coming. So if a musician or a star is up and coming, they're just starting to achieve recognition. So you can have an up and coming actor who's just made a really successful film, or an up and coming musician who's just recorded a hit song.
Long after you're up and coming, you might be lucky and get to the peak of your career. So when you're at the peak of your career, that's the high point, the peak, el pico, cima. That's your best point. We could talk about many artists and agree or disagree about when they were at the peak of their career. Mm-hmm. Some people think that you peak near the start, some people in the middle, some at the end. We'll talk about that later.
Do you think you've reached your career as an English teacher? You've peaked as an English teacher, or you haven't reached your peak yet?
Oh no, Craig, I think the best is yet to come. The best is yet to come.
I agree.
And as podcasters, Craig and I, we've only just begun.
We've only just begun by the Carpenters. We've only just begun. If you have gone past your peak, then you can say that you are past your best. So, for example, unfortunately, Frank Sinatra, when he was singing before he died, he was past his best. And if you heard Paul McCartney when the Olympics were in London and he sang at the piano, I think you'll agree he was past his best. His voice wasn't as good as it had been before. So if you pass your best, you're no longer at your peak. You're too old to rock and roll, too young to die.
A very painful example of someone past their best. If you look at video clips on YouTube of Marlene Dietrich in her older years, oh, it's so painful. I mean, she has an awful voice, really. You know, your grandmother could sing better.
Too many cigarettes.
She smokes on stage while she's singing, but she's famous, so she can do it. If anyone else sang like that, would be booed off the stage. She was very much past the best. But hey, Marlene Dietrich, so people applauded her.
Just as a question for you, Reza, do you remember who sang or who released the album Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die?
Oh, it's a very famous title, but who was it? Oh, I don't know.
You'll know the name. Jethro Tull.
Jethro Tull.
With the flute.
I should have known that because I'm quite a fan of Jethro Tull.
Me too. Yeah. Well, what do you think? Classic or not classic? Do you think he deserves to be in the list?
Jethro Tull.
Of a legend?
Well, Jethro Tull, that's the name of the group. It's Ian Anderson. You're thinking of the front man, yeah?
You're right. Absolutely right.
Yes, for me, Ian Anderson, but Jethro Tull in general as a group, they are unsung heroes. Mm-hmm. They deserve to be a lot more famous than they are.
I agree.
I think they were really groundbreaking. They were trend-setting, but because that was a long time ago, they've been forgotten.
So you said an unsung hero. How would you define that? A person who's an unsung hero?
Somebody who should be known or should be known more for their achievements, but they aren't.
Yeah.
If you've never heard of Jethro Tull or you haven't heard their music, give it a listen, and I'm sure you'll agree with me that they should be more famous. They are, for many people, unsung heroes.
Reza, I made a list that then you added to. So we've got some names here.
We brainstormed.
We
put our thoughts together.
We wrote down on paper, digitally, things that we singers that we like. So let's
and singers that we don't like,
and singers that we don't like, but may be considered by some as pop legends or rock legends. So let's go down the list and see if we can agree on A, if we like them, and B, we think they deserve to be on the list of pop and rock legends from the UK. Yeah.
So right at the top, we put, not surprisingly, David Bowie.
Rest in peace, David Bowie, yeah.
Because he died recently, I guess he was on our minds. Who doesn't know that David Bowie died recently? I imagine he was famous, still is famous, all over the world, in all continents.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of David Bowie. I always have been. I like the person as much as his music. And the one thing I liked about him was the way he constantly changed his image during his career. He was never boring. He never kept the same music style and image through his career. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of David Bowie, and I grew up listening to him.
Yeah, me too. In fact, he was such a changeable character that there are even two ways to pronounce his surname. Craig says Bowie, and many people do, and I say Bowie. You'll hear both.
You say Bowie? Oh, okay.
Plenty of people do. Yeah.
Yep.
It's weird. So there are even two ways to pronounce the surname. He even left that ambiguous.
What about Annie Lennox? Is she an unsung hero?
Oh, well, she's pretty famous.
She is?
In the UK. Mm-hmm. The Spanish-speaking world might not know her very well, but she's famous in the UK for sure. Do you like her?
I do, very much, yeah. She was with the Eurythmics. I'm not sure if I'd call her a legend, but she's definitely one of my favourite singers. So let's run down our list of names and then we can highlight any we think deserve a special mention. Do you want to go ahead and read them out for us, Reza?
Okay. We got David Bowie, Annie Lennox, the Spice Girls.
Sorry.
No comment. Eric Clapton, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, both from the Rolling Stones. Dusty Springfield, the great favourites of my dad. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, the Beatles, as I'm sure you know. Robert Plant and Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. Roger Daltrey of The Who. Joan Armatrading, some of you may or may not know. Joan Armatrading. Adele. Elton John, everybody knows. Freddie Mercury as well. Van Morrison from my hometown of Belfast. Ozzy Osbourne. Any more, Craig?
Yep, continuing, we've got Liam and Noel Gallagher from Oasis, Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, Rod Stewart, Paul Weller from The Jam, Sting, George Michael, Amy Winehouse, Morrissey, Kate Bush, Elvis Costello, Lulu.
No comment.
No comment. Roger Waters, Syd Barrett, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, Phil Collins, Peter Gabriel, Phil Lynott, who was born in England but raised in Ireland, from Thin Lizzy, and Gary Moore, who was also a Thin Lizzy member and also from Reza's home country, Northern Ireland.
Yes, there's one Gary Moore song in particular. I've put a link to it at the end of the list because I loved that song so much when I was a kid. And even if you've never heard of Gary Moore, I bet if you're over 40, you'll know that song.
Yeah.
So check it out.
Yeah, there's a link in the show notes which can be found at inglespodcast.com/175. Let's go back and see if we can find any, because this is quite a mixed list, isn't it? Some of these stand out to me definitely as being rock and roll legends.
We both agree.
Not so much. We both agree what?
We both agree, don't we, about David Bowie without any doubt?
Yes, we've said that. David Bowie definitely belongs there. And Robert Plant and Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, definitely. Led Zeppelin, that band, mean a lot to me, and they definitely should be on the list, I think.
Me too. I agree with that. Others we could argue about. What about Mick Jagger, Keith Richards? You're quite a fan.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of the Rolling Stones, and they're still playing. They're still going. I mean, how could they not be part of a list of legends of British music? They're fantastic icons, and I've got a lot of admiration for the Stones.
Well, Craig standing up, he should perhaps get a sit down. I agree they should be legends, but I think they're overrated, the Rolling Stones.
What?
I think they deserve to be legends, but they're not the best of the best by any means, in my opinion. I find them overrated, means sobreestimado, but I agree they are legends. Legends for sure, but David Bowie was so much more original and thoughtful and thought-provoking for me than the Rolling Stones, personally.
Well, I do disagree. I don't think they're overrated, and I'd be interested to know what our audience thinks. But do you think the Beatles are overrated?
Get ready for this. I think the Beatles are possibly underrated, and they're pretty damn famous. I think they should possibly be even more famous. What about that?
I don't know if they could be. I mean, the Beatles, worldwide fame, they've been recognised and appreciated for so many years.
Yep.
But
I must admit, I have to stifle a smug laugh sometimes when people compare the Rolling Stones to the Beatles. They're not in the same category. The Rolling Stones are not in the same classification as the Beatles. The Rolling Stones are very good rock and rollers, but hey, they didn't innovate a fraction of what the Beatles did.
But they kind of split popular culture down the middle in the UK because they became famous more or less at the same time. So the Rolling Stones were the alternative to the clean-cut Beatles. Clean-cut means very well-dressed with very neat, tidy, pretty hairstyles. The Rolling Stones were the rebels against the Beatles, which was really interesting for me at the time because you either liked one or the other. It's very rare that you were fans of both. My sister loved the Beatles because she's a bit older than me. I prefer the Rolling Stones because back in the day when I was younger, I was more of a rebel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's plenty of Rolling Stones songs that I love, Can't Get No Satisfaction, all that. Now, great songs. But from a musical point of view, I just think the Beatles, apart from writing great tunes, a lot of people just don't realize just how much they innovated. They really were very original, extremely original, but they've been copied so many times that it's hard to think that they once were the first to do certain things no one had done before. So many things, but that was 50 years ago. But they were so groundbreaking. I think they deserve every ounce of fame that they have and more.
Before we move on to people who maybe should not be on this list, there's two that I'd like to pull out and give a special mention to: Eric Clapton and Roger Daltrey from The Who. You can still hear The Who's music now on popular American TV series because it's music that doesn't seem to get old, in my opinion. It's iconic music that still can still be listened to and enjoyed. And Eric Clapton, I mean, he's an icon of British music. Do you agree with those two?
I totally agree. If you had seen me yesterday, Craig, I was wearing a T-shirt which said The Who on it. So yeah, I'm obviously a big fan. I have the T-shirt. Been there, done it, got the T-shirt, as we say.
I hope you were wearing it the right way round and not back to front.
I hope so, yeah. So yeah, The Who, brilliant. Roger Daltrey, yeah. Totally.
However, why would you include on this list Lulu, the Spice Girls?
Well, I admit I wrote them and I'm not fans. But, many people, particularly of a certain age, between about kind of late 50s to maybe 70 or mid 70s, are big fans.
True.
So it's this podcast isn't just for young people. I mean, my dad was a colossal fan of Dusty Springfield.
So is mine, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And my dad sadly has passed away, but Craig's dad's still alive, and he's a big fan of Dusty Springfield.
Yeah, true. That's true. Okay. Any others that you would like to single out for a special mention?
To get your reaction, yeah. What about Van Morrison? I'm keeping him there as a legend, but I would say that because he's from Belfast, wouldn't I?
So you're biased. I've never been a huge fan of his music. I don't know it very well. I haven't listened to a lot of it. I recognize his fame as an influencer, of a person who's influenced later bands and music. But personally speaking, I wouldn't include him in the list because, from my point of view, he's not somebody that stands out to me as iconic in British music. But I understand why you want him in there, and I wouldn't argue against it. I'd argue against the Spice Girls, but not against him.
Yeah, you know what? I would agree that he doesn't stand out as innovative. I don't think he particularly was innovative. He wasn't groundbreaking. He just did good kind of blues or rhythm and blues and rock very well. He just did it very well. But you see, I would say more or less the same about the Rolling Stones. They did rhythm and blues and rock and still do very well.
But the Rolling Stones' roots are in rhythm and blues and old-time American blues, and they then brought that up and added rock to it and made it successful to a new generation and a different audience. So they were innovative in that respect and groundbreaking because they took music that were the roots of blues in America and then they brought it to the world in the form of rock. And Keith Richards' songs, just for me, are absolutely amazing for that reason.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I admit that. Yeah, they were innovative in that sense of having a more kind of a rocky version of rhythm and blues. That's true. Craig, what about the one and only Freddie Mercury?
Oh, yeah, rest in peace, Freddie. Yeah. I never really appreciated him until he died.
Well, we could say that about a lot of rock legends, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Once they die, they're guaranteed immortal legend status if they die young.
Yep.
If you die old, that's boring. But if you die young, hey,
Yeah, but no, it was very sad when he did die, and the world was robbed of a great talent. And yeah, if you watch his videos on YouTube, then you realize what a showman he was and how he could work a crowd and put the song across in a way that was very, very special. Yeah,
I mean,
huge fan.
I find someone between the age of about 30, but probably younger, from 30 to about 75 years old, who doesn't know Bohemian Rhapsody. It's almost impossible to find someone who doesn't know it.
Yep. I can remember it was the top of the charts for over 6 weeks in the UK. There are some music. Speaking of music, there were some music styles that I noticed on a website, especially when looking at UK music styles, and I was surprised to see that I didn't recognise a lot of them, which probably reflects my age. But let me read them to you, Reza, and see if you've heard of them and if you know these different music styles. Obviously, blues, rock, heavy metal, death metal, I've heard of, but I don't really know what it is.
I was a big fan of death metal when I was about 17 years old. As you do means which is typical.
What's the difference between heavy metal and death metal?
Death metal is even heavier and even more bleak and dark and despairing than heavy metal.
And you were into that, were you?
Oh, yeah.
So to be into means to be a fan of it. You were a fan of it.
Yeah. And it's very often quicker as well and harder.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavier. A lot of teenage boys are into that type of thing, aren't they?
And then progressive rock, I would guess that's like Genesis, Yes, that kind of music.
Well, Genesis in their early days, but I think their style changed a bit and it became a bit more what we would call commercial.
Okay.
So for me, progressive rock refers to music which is quite experimental. It's progressive, quite experimental, not quite your mainstream. Mainstream means del corriente principal, a little bit alternative. Music that kind of takes itself a bit serious, maybe for some people's taste too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But I admit, again, when I was in my late teens and 20s, I loved progressive rock as well. Genesis,
I was never a fan. Never a fan of progressive rock. But yeah, I get what it is. New Age, I knew. Ska. I used to listen to ska. I was more a fan of ska when I was younger than progressive rock. Ska will be bands like Madness, kind of with a reggae beat. So that's ska music. Hard rock, I think we understand. Punk rock, we haven't spoken about, but that's very kind of commercial, isn't it?
You were talking earlier about Sid Vicious. We've left him off the list. Perhaps we should have put him on the list. Sid Vicious.
It was I don't know.
He certainly is very famous.
Yeah, he wasn't a musician.
And Johnny Rotten as well.
I don't know. He's very famous, but I don't know.
Well, does he deserve to be on the list? If not, why not?
I don't think so, because he was packaged by Malcolm McLaren, who was the genius behind the Sex Pistols and the punk rock image that many people bought into. And I don't think they would have got where they did in music history if it weren't for Malcolm McLaren's idea of putting them forward as a rock and roll swindle and putting the punk movement forward as something to take the mickey or to make fun of the whole idea of pop culture. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I don't class I don't class the Sex Pistols as a serious band. Do you? They couldn't play. Which was the whole point.
Yeah, maybe not serious, but certainly they made a huge impact. That's for sure.
They made a huge impact, but could you class them as artists? Were they creators of anything?
Well, I tell you what, we've put on our list the Spice Girls. Could the Spice Girls play or perform any better than the Sex Pistols?
Exactly the same. They were part of a marketing ploy, in my opinion. They were part of a movement to present an image to the public. They weren't musicians by themselves. It was the image of the girls. It was the image of the music was secondary. The main thing was the image. Same with punk.
You used a very nice expression there, a marketing ploy, Ploy. It's a very common expression talking about pop music. A ploy is a tactic, so a marketing ploy is a nice collocation. And Craig, things haven't really changed. Pop and rock stars still use marketing ploys. They go naked in a video or almost naked. They say controversial things that they know will upset people, all to become legends, all to get fame.
I'm going to read some more different music styles. And as we did with the artists, Reza, tell me if any of these stand out to you for special mention. So there's Bhangra music. I've got a feeling, Reza, that you'd be able to explain what Bhangra music is. That's Bhangra, because I'm not sure what Bhangra music is.
Well, I'm no expert, but I understand vaguely that it's kind of a mixture of traditional Punjabi Indian music and pop and rock influences kind of mixed together. So it's very specific to one part of India, Punjab, but it has become very popular in the UK as well these days, along with kind of Bollywood style, dance music.
I wonder if any of our audience have heard of Bhangra music, if they listen to it, because it does tend to be something more associated definitely to India, but also to the UK rather than Spain. So if you've heard of Bhangra and you like it, let us know. There's also electric folk, folk and rock, folk punk, acid jazz, trip hop, indie, shoegaze music, grunge, drum and bass, goth rock, grime, Britpop, and dubstep.
Hold on, let me ask you about a few shoegaze.
No idea.
Shoegaze.
That's music that I haven't heard of before. I have heard of grunge.
I do know what shoegaze is, Craig.
You do?
Because I didn't know when I saw it on your list and I checked it out on the internet.
Okay.
It's the type of music which is kind of a bit like trip hop, where you just gaze at your shoes.
Okay, so it's quite
you look down
hypnotic.
at your shoes. Hypnotic. You look at your shoes. Literally, you kind of gaze. That's to look at something for a long time in a kind of mystic way. You look at your shoes and don't kind of move very much. That's
so I suspect you might need some artificial substance in order to enjoy it.
I imagine it goes hand in hand with that.
To go hand in hand means to go together. So yeah, hand in hand with drugs.
And goth. Do the Spanish say gothic or gotico? Or
Gotico, I think.
A more old-fashioned term, which they used 20 years ago in Spain, was siniestro. Did you know that?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Los siniestros.
Dressed in black with makeup and yeah.
We call them in English goths, that kind of gothic look. Now, talk about marketing ploys and gimmicks. That's Gimmick. A gimmick is like something just to grab your attention. I knew a lot of goths when I was, in my late teens and 20s, when goth was at its peak for the first time. Mm-hmm. It's come back since then, but that was when it's at its peak at it the first time around. And people did crazy things, like they dressed in black and put white makeup on, and they used to hang out, gather together at cemeteries and things like that. Anything kind of gothic and kind of make you think of vampires and horror stories and all that. I thought, what idiots. I've never had time for goth. For me, it's one of the most ridiculous cultures. And I'm sorry if there's any goth listeners, but please write to me and tell me why I shouldn't criticize it. Explain it to me, because I just don't get it.
Razor needs an explanation. That's how I feel about punk music. So let's finish with one final question. How do some of these musicians that we've said are legends, how do they achieve the status of legend? How do they stand out? What makes Eric Clapton so different from an artist who wouldn't be a legend?
Oh, and that's an easy question. He can play incredibly well. So Eric Clapton deserves to be a legend because not many people can play a guitar as well as that.
Or compose as well. Yep. Tears in Heaven, that he wrote about his son who died, unfortunately, was voted one of the saddest songs ever written.
And if we were doing an American list of legends, but we're not, we're doing a British list, I would put in a lot of names that some people wouldn't know of blues guitarists, because those guys could really play.
Yeah.
But unless you're a blues fan, you won't have heard of them. Mm-hmm. But boy, they could really play.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I feel that about Eric Clapton. Yeah, he was a commercial success. He sold a lot of records. He's well known, but he could play. Like the Beatles, the same, in my opinion. They really could play.
Yeah.
And they became millionaires doing it.
Exactly. There's one final comment I'd like to make, and some of these people on the list, like the Spice Girls and the Sex Pistols, were driven by media hype and media promotion. I think it's worth mentioning that the internet has really flattened the playing field. To flatten the playing field means make everything equal, because in the old days you needed a record company behind you, you needed a promoter to make sure your music got to the people so they could listen to it. These days, it's very easy for a band to record at home and publish their music on the internet and become famous. However, it's a double-edged sword. A double-edged sword is espada, and it's double-edged, which means there's a good side and a bad side. So there's a positive side and a negative side. The positive side is that any musician can become famous and make money. However, the negative side is that you don't necessarily make money when everybody's copying your music and you're not getting paid for the work you're creating. So I wanted to mention that, the fact that internet has really changed the way legends become legends. Not the same way they used to. Any final words before we go out the door this week?
No, I think we'd better stop there, because this episode could go on forever.
Yeah.
Because, as Francisco from Ubita says, the list of British rock legends is enormous. And we better stop there, or we'll never stop.
Hey, we both love music, so we could speak about music, and we probably will, after we turn off the microphone, continue speaking about some of these musicians. But which bands and musicians do you like? Who are your favourite stars and legends and groups and bands? Send us a voice message and tell us. We'd love to hear what you think. You can send us a message by going to speakpipe.com/inglespodcast, and you can contact us by email to me at craig@inglespodcast.com,
or to me, Reza, at belfastreza@gmail.com.
And before we go, as always, we'd like to thank our wonderful sponsors, who are Nicolai, Ana, Pedro, Manuel, Maite, Lara, Maria, Sara, Carlos, Zara, Heath, Picazo, Mamin, Juan, Cory, Mariel, Jorge, Raúl, Rafael, Manuel, Agus, Manuel Verazquez, Nestor from nestorgm.com, Juan Carlos, Rafa, Beatriz, José Luis Aragui, Miren Full. Thank you all very, very much for your continued support on Patreon. If you'd like to join our Patreon program, go to patreon.com/inglespodcast.
We'd also like to thank, as usual, Arminda from Madrid, Alberto from Granada, and Angelica Bello from Madrid for continuing to transcribe the podcast to write out the words that Craig and I speak. We now have full transcriptions for episodes 131 to 142, and also some of the early episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
And on next week's episode, we'll be speaking about camping, sleeping under the clear blue sky and the night stars. If you're interested in camping, or you'd just like to learn some camping vocabulary, please join us next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later. Sword in Spanish is
Espalda.
espalda.
Espalda, yeah.
Espalda.
Ah, no, sorry.
No, espada.
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 Ah, that's right.
Espada. I always make the mistake. That's why I'm just looking at you.
Sorry. Espalda is back. It's
Yeah.
Espada, isn't it? Yeah,
I always make the same mistake.
Yeah,
Sword is espada.